Absolutely, I can see the future. I've been doing it for 30 years.
Everybody talks about a dream, and everybody has dreams. I didn't have a dream, I had a vision.
What he dreamed was, in fact, what happened.
I still remember her voice now, saying, "Sorry to bother you, Dr. Hahn. I've had this waking premonition of an attack."
I think the fear is that other people will actually blame you for it and say, you know, if you hadn't have had this dream, it wouldn't have happened.
We're dealing with a real effect. It really is information coming from the future.
Coincidence, skeptics will say. Just lucky guess. How many lucky guesses do you need before you turn around and say, hang on a minute, something's going on here?
What would you do if you woke up to discover your dreams foretold the future? Around the world, there are continuing reports of everyday people knowing that something was about to happen before it did. Now Hollywood is making a movie called Premonition about this kind of experience.
Mrs. Hanson?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry to tell you this. Your husband was in a car accident. He died on the scene yesterday.
Tomorrow we should probably start thinking about funeral arrangements.
Mom, I'm not ready for that.
Nobody's ready for anything like this, honey.
Everybody talks about a dream, and everybody has dreams. I didn't have a dream, I had a vision.
David Booth is still haunted today by what he lived through over 25 years ago.
The dream would always start out in the same way. It was a bright, sunlit day, and I'm looking at a very large airport and a very long runway. And there's a really large plane, and I can see American Airlines. I see the plane starting to taxi on the runway, and it gathers up speed. All of a sudden, as it's going off, there's a perception in my mind that there's something wrong with the sound that the engine is making. The plane all of a sudden seems to go like almost go straight up in the air, and then it turns just like this, and then goes straight down into the ground and explodes in this humongous inferno. And then this wave of despair, just like a physical object would just hit you right in your chest. Next morning, the same thing, the same time, right in waking up. And it wouldn't stop. I've got to do something about this. What can I do about this? The only thing that I knew to do was to call the FAA. And that's what I did, fully expecting to just have the phone hung up at me.
David sounded perfectly sane and credible. There was nothing kooky about him at all. He'd had a disturbing dream 7 nights in a row. He had a problem, and I listened to him. It was my job to do that.
Every day it got worse and worse and worse. Not knowing what to do, not knowing what I was supposed to do. Not being able to forget an image seared not just into my mind, but into the very fabric of my entire being.
Well, I would talk to him and listen to him. David's dream didn't give you enough information to do anything with. It didn't give a location, it didn't give a flight, some numbers which didn't make any sense. I said, well, thank you. There's nothing we can do about it, but thank you for the information.
May 25th, 1979. I knew I'll never have this dream again. It's gonna happen soon.
On Friday morning, he called again to our Cincinnati office, and then he patched back into me and said he'd now had the dream 10 nights in a row.
Got up, went to work. I was at work for 15 minutes when the phone rang. Dave, I'm sorry to tell you, American Airlines DC-10 just crashed an hour ago on takeoff. Nobody survived.
In Chicago, taking off from O'Hare Airport, a silver American Airlines airplane that had an engine in the tail crashed, not inverted, but turning, after it passed over an abandoned hangar, a low building. It hit me as to how accurate he was. What he dreamed was, in fact, basically what happened. You've got to experience that to understand how eerie it is.
I still think about, and I always still wonder, was there anything else that I could have done? Was there anything else Jack could have done?
I don't think there's any way that David could have done any more than he did. You've got to remember, in aviation alone, there's over 20 to 25,000 flights a day by the scheduled airlines. So it's difficult to pinpoint a particular future event. In the 30 years I was with FAA, that was the only time anybody ever called in with any kind of a dream like that I'm aware of.
I'm not the only one that these things happen to. I'm just a stupid fool that actually called the FAA before it happened.
The word premonition comes from the Latin premonere, meaning to warn in advance.
Premonitions usually tend to be associated with negative events, and sometimes premonitions are referred to in relation to kind of dreams. They usually relate to a person that's close to you, a spouse, a close family member, a close friend.
In the scientific community, the term precognition was coined to describe this type of sixth sense.
Precognition is basically obtaining information about future events, not through the normal senses and not through kind of logical inference, so not by problem solving or guessing.
A premonition is really just a layperson's term for a precognitive experience or a feeling that something is about to happen. In the collections of cases, we find there are natural groupings, and of course the largest grouping is the dreams. Dreams that are frightening, they have really rather dramatic characteristics that people recognize as being unusual, and they portray something that the person thinks is going to happen to them, and often it does. Often this changes behavior, people will alter trip plans, and it turns out to have been a very beneficial decision.
When I talk about the dream at this point, it's just sort of surreal. It's like, it's unbelievable. And I don't really talk about it, honestly. Deciding to speak to you is very difficult for me, and it was a really big decision for me.
Sana Ralston went on a fateful vacation to Thailand in late 2004.
The whole Thailand trip just came up because I love to travel. Before I did leave, I did have a dream. I wanted to brush it off, but it kept going on. The dream was we were in trouble. We were in a woods or jungle. We were very scared, in a bad place, and we were cold and we were wet, and there was mayhem. Like, there'd be faces coming in and out, and people, no one that I knew, but just people were around us. We were bruised up a little bit, but we were okay. And I just kept remembering we didn't die, so it's okay. I remember being very nervous in the dream and very scared. It kept haunting me. It was just too real. Right before I left, I decided that I should write a letter, goodbye letter to my family, and just stuck it on my nightstand. And I told my best friend to go in my apartment. If anything happened, something would be there. I've never done that. And I just thought, you know, what's gonna happen? It's a dream. I just decided I'm going. The trip was phenomenal. Had a great time. You just travel by these long-tail boats. It's not a big deal. And we had backpacks. You'd land up on the beach, get off, walk up. That's just how you do it. The gentleman on the island helped us rent a boat for one day. On the boat, when we were going out there, water at that time was not as pristine and calm. We were rocking. Now looking back, I realize I was getting that sign, something's not right. All of a sudden, you could hear, feel something, and we looked to the left out into the ocean, and this just waves started coming. And it came flying in, and you could hear it. It's like an airplane. And it took us up, and it just crashed on in. There was a time where we thought we might flip over, but I'll never forget the noise and the sound of that. I sat down, and I kept staring at the hull of our boat, just waiting. I'm waiting for it to start pulling apart.
Sana was in the middle of the most destructive tsunami in modern history.
That I remember looking at the backside of Koh Lanta. To me, it was evil. There was death around it. I could see it. I smelt it. I could hear it. Something bad is happening, and it's bigger than me, and I might not make it. And at that time, he dropped the engine in and took us in. And we jumped out, and it was mucky and water. A lot of mud because the water's receding, debris and things and people and stuff all going on at the same time. And he just said, they're bringing everyone to Highland, you need to get to the top. It was not until probably 5 or 6 o'clock at night when I sat down, I did kind of think, oh my goodness, this is my dream. This is the jungle that I was sitting in, being wet and cold and scared. This whole notion of premonitions is something else out there that we can't touch, feel, or explain. People are very uncomfortable with it. I had an experience that people have had for years and that people can have every day.
1632. Dutch trading colony off the coast of Carolina. An hysterical midwife claimed to have walked through the aftermath of a terrible hurricane that hadn't happened yet.
So what happened?
They hung her for being a witch. 2 days later, the entire town was wiped out by a gale force hurricane.
Who are these people? Why did it happen?
You see, history's full of unexplained phenomena. Nobody knows why. Some people thought they suffered from what the ancients called blasphemare absens fides, the dangers of the faithless.
It's almost like a curse.
Or a miracle.
When I went to school, I had a dream of these 2 bombs in Canterbury Park falling, and the next night they fell. Kids told their parents about this, and the parents said, don't have anything to do with David Mandel, he's in with Satan. And I went through quite a frightening time, that none of the kids would actually speak to me. They'd been banned from talking to me. Even the teachers wouldn't believe it.
A retired university art teacher, David Mandel is today renowned for his paintings of precognitive dreams.
Most people, if they have a dream, they have to write it down in notes. As an artist, I was able to very quickly put some quite accurate imagery down in colour as well of what I was seeing. But a lot of my dreams, the actual sketches I make of them, are very sort of disjointed. There's little scenes going on all over the place. Dreams, if they're about a major event or something like that, they're usually more vivid. They're nearly always in colour. They've got a sort of sharpness, like jagged edges sort of thing. Symbols are very important in dreams. If I dream now of a World War II British fighter, the Hurricane, I know there's going to be a terrible wind or hurricane because I'm given the symbol of a hurricane. It's happened about 8 times and it's come right every single time. The 1987 hurricane happened like that. I saw 16 of these World War II British Hurricane fighters in 4 diamond formations, 4 to a diamond. The number 16 just kept cropping up over and over again. It was 16 days later that the hurricane came. When you get things like that, I know it's a premonition dream of the future. Something fairly big is going to happen. If you're going to tell people that you've had this dream and you've got just people sign the backs of the drawings, they're not going to believe that. They'll say you just got them to do it after the event or something like this. And the bank photograph idea really fitted in very, very well with that because there was absolutely no doubt. Nothing could be altered on the date display on the bank. And that would verify the fact that, I was telling the truth. Something was going on here. The quickest one that's ever happened was the Watford train crash. I had the dream, I took the painting I made of it to the bank on the same day. I think the photograph was taken about 4:40, just before they closed. The train crashed at Watford 18 minutes later. What had happened is a train had come alongside another train and had hit the back of it, and the carriages went right up on top of the carriage of the train it hit. So it was sort of perched in the air above the other carriage. Quite a mess. All the overhead lines and everything's all been ripped to bits. It was quite dramatic. Now, the really sort of unnerving thing, my body started to actually start going quite cold with not fright, but with shock, really. There must have been people boarding this doomed train while I was having the bank photograph taken. The fear is that other people will actually blame you for it and say, if you hadn't have had this dream, it wouldn't have happened.
Sometimes people have had a dream and felt they might have done something to prevent the bad event happening, and then it's very upsetting, and they carry a burden of guilt. Now, it's pretty rare that you can intervene. If you see a plane crashing, there's not much you can do about it. But it's very unsettling when these things happen. I think it's important for people to know and not feel isolated or made to feel too special or too unusual. These things can happen and you don't cause it by dreaming it.
It doesn't stop the feeling of guilt that you've had this dream.
I guess what I think is, when in doubt, act as if you can intervene. When in doubt, if you think someone's going to die, call them up and tell them you love them, or whatever you need to tell them. Act as if you can do something, and who knows? I certainly don't know.
Oh, what's this all about? Huh?
Mama said to give you extra hugs.
Extra hugs? Well, extra hugs and extra kisses. Now, off to bed. Go brush your teeth.
Hey, girls, why don't you tell Daddy how much you love him?
Love you, Daddy. Me too.
Well, thank you, ladies.
Aren't you going to tell them?
Tell them what?
That you love them.
You girls know how much I love you, right? Right? I love you more than anything in the whole wide world.
One of the difficulties with precognition is this idea of, is the future fixed or not? And if the future isn't fixed, can a person intervene? If you get information about a future event, a plane crash, or something bad's going to happen to you, can you take steps to avoid that?
The intervention paradox. The paradox is that if you get information from the future, will that allow you to do something now that will cause that future not to occur? And so how could that be? So there are two ways of thinking of it. One way is that the future is actually fixed. There's destiny. There is no way you can change it. Even if you get information about the future, you may try to change it, but you won't be able to. The other way of thinking of it is that the future is probabilistic, that we're sort of in the present and the future is spinning out through a trillion or more, actually almost an infinite number of possibilities playing out at each instant.
I think with precognitive dreams, they tell us something that's going to happen in the future. And I know because the precognitive dream had saved my life. Back in the 50s, I worked for a pioneering rocket engine company as the only female chemist in an all-male department. And I worked on rocket fuels and high-temperature lubricants, things like that. And the fuels were very unstable and very dangerous. One day, I was working on a kind of pioneering project of a new gas that they had produced in our laboratory. I went to remove the safety shields at the end of the day and pulled up one plexiglass shield and pushed another one aside, and the whole thing just blew into my face. And I was literally burning to death. So I knew I needed help, and nobody was coming. People ran away. I heard a voice in the doorway just as I felt myself lift out of my body. I woke up in the arms of a technician, my good friend and colleague, Ed Butler. He told me what had happened, that, he was not a hero. He had rescued me exactly as he had dreamt about doing it several times before. Each time he dreamt that, he was in his laboratory and he heard the explosion. Then he heard me screaming, eventually came running, and then went in and pulled me out by one foot that wasn't burning. That was the only thing, and put me under a deluge shower. And at that point, he would always wake up. When it really happened in real life time, he carried out the rescue just as he had in his dream. The repetitiveness for him constituted rehearsals. I was astounded, and neither one of us would tell the people we worked with about it for a long time, because they would have thought we were totally cuckoo. I do think it's an innate human ability. I think that some people have greater ability than others. If we pay attention to these things and really put our minds to it, our dreaming minds and our waking consciousness, we can change many things that happen to us and to other people.
Can I help you?
I'm Linda Hansen.
Hello, Linda. I'm Dr. Roth.
Do you know me?
Should I?
I wake up and he's dead. I wake up and he's alive.
different things around me all the time that I can't explain. Things that I've done. People talking to me. People who know me, but I have never met.
People like me.
Yes.
Seems a little complicated.
Tell me about it.
I have that look.
What look?
Like you want to tell me something.
I had a dream you're gonna die.
It was only a dream. Everything's gonna be fine.
I didn't really understand that I could see things that I know today are foreboding warnings of disaster, and I've had a lot, lots and lots.
Since her youth, Barbara Garwell has dreamt of disasters and assassinations before they actually happened.
The first big one, I was about 14. I was on a hillside in Northern Ireland. I looked up at the sky and I saw this aircraft. Nosedive. The fuselage of the aircraft broke away. And as I looked down, my voice said, 80 bodies there. I walked sadly to the left-hand side of the field, and there smiling were 3 men. Suspended above their head was a rugby ball. It was 2 o'clock as I woke up. I ran downstairs and I said, Dad, please let me tell you about this dream. I went to Mass, came home that Sunday. My dad turned the radio on and God, he said, Barbara, listen. Hillside, Northern Ireland, aircraft, 80 bodies. That's your dream you told me this morning. No, Dad, in a way. But I said, where are the survivors? But he said, no mention of survivors. So I said, well, it's wrong to say that it was my dream in full. The following evening, we had a local paper. I opened the page, and I chill to this day. 3 survivors in cockpit of rugby airline disaster. Took it to my dad. I said, Dad, yeah, there is the dream in full, in 2 halves. But that is the dream I saw at 2 o'clock on Sunday morning.
What interested me about Barbara Garwell was that when I analysed her premonitions, there was often a 3-day latency period between the premonition and the later event. You can't just ignore that. You can't just shrug at that sort of finding. This is very important because it adds to the veracity of the thing.
A premonition always awakens me. There seem to be, we'll say 8 out of 10 worldwide events, major events, like John Lennon and the attempt on President Reagan's life. It's just a voice, but I can't describe, can't attach male or female to it. Whatever this is, whoever warns me, I don't know. But there is certainly something.
She only rang me once to tell me about a premonition. I still remember her voice now saying, sorry to bother you, Dr. Hearn, but I've had this waking premonition of an attack, something to do with the Pope.
I saw the Pope, as I described it as a citadel. It looked like an old castle. And I saw the Pope walk under the canopy. On the green field, a multitude of people, masses and masses. And somewhere at the front, there was a man, and at the end of his hand, he held a dagger. And as the Pope turned around and walked by this guy, he lunged at the Pope with the dagger. A security man retrieved his hand, and the Pope fell.
And 3 days later, a man lunged at the Pope at the Fatima shrine in Portugal with a bayonet.
And when I looked at the footage, it was exactly in detail as I had seen on the Sunday. Now, no way is that coincidence, and no way did I make that up. Yes, I did cry and I was upset, and I am to this day, because I couldn't do anything.
Attempts to compile premonitions like Barbara's and use them to avert tragedies from taking place started in the 1960s after one particularly horrific disaster.
Aberfan was a Welsh village, and there was a spoil heap by a coal mine that towered over the village. and it collapsed one morning when the children were at school.
116 kids were killed, 28 adults. And it turned out afterwards, the parents reported the kids were having a lot of what they call premonitions about school friends being killed, about going to school and finding it's all dark, or a close friend was going to be buried, and things like that.
That was the time when people started to set up premonition bureaus to see if you could get a number of people precognizing the same event, and in so doing, avert a disaster.
There have been efforts to create registries of premonitions where people would be invited to send in possible premonitions, but people have premonitions about a lot of things that don't come true, and some disasters that do come true have no premonitions whatsoever.
The trouble with premonition bureaus, you do get inundated with a lot of information. It's rather difficult to know what to do statistically about such situations.
Coincidence, skeptics will say. Just lucky guess. How many lucky guesses do you need before you turn around and say, hang on a minute, you know, something's going on here?
Chris Robinson is well known in England for his premonitions and precognitive dreams.
Nobody has died that I know in the last 20 years that I haven't known it was going to happen and when it was going to happen. I've known it was going to happen by the person who's dying coming in a dream telling me they were going to die. My wife is from the Philippines. Early this year, she was going to book a ticket for her and the children to go home for Easter. We were going to book the tickets on a Monday morning. Just before I woke up that Monday morning, I had a very, very, very vivid, lucid type dream where I was with my wife's father, and he said to me, Christopher, you've looked after one Filipino girl for almost 20 years. I want you to promise me that you'll look after my wife. He said, I'm going to die very suddenly of a heart attack. And if you buy the tickets today, Bessie won't be able to come to my funeral. I felt quite strange even talking to my wife about it. We went to go out and book the tickets, and I said to Bessie, we can't do them today. Why not? I said, I don't know why not. But your dad was in a dream and he doesn't want us to book the tickets. If we buy the tickets today for Easter and anything happens between now and Easter, you wouldn't be able to go because we can't change them, and we would have spent the money we've saved.
So I said, don't be so stupid, you know? And then on Friday, my mom phoned me and my dad died.
The message was on the answer phone from her mother that her father had died that evening, very suddenly of a heart attack. And of course we went down and we bought those tickets for that night. And she was on her way within 24 hours. We've been married for 20 years. He wasn't sick. She's been lots of times. I'm sorry, that cannot be coincidence. I don't care what anybody says.
I do accept his dreams. I do accept it. But sometimes I don't take notice of it because I get frightened.
I don't believe I can see the future. I know I can. Belief doesn't have anything to do with it anymore.
Something bad is going to happen. I need faith.
Faith is just believing in something beyond yourself. Something you can't feel or smell or touch.
But if it's too late?
It's never too late to realize what's important in your life, to fight for it.
I don't know what to fight for.